This briefly is a book about a young journalist in Lodi, California. I've never been in Lodi, California, but he's disgusted as a journalist working for a twice a week weekly. He is disgusted, and so he takes this job as a public relations man at an oil refinery in the Long Beach area. He's never been in public relations, and so he has enough confidence in himself that he can apply for the job and be very effectively. So let me read from the first part of the book, which kind of explains the smell of money. And then I'll get into some of the other details too, and I will be glad to answer any questions. So he's interviewing the refinery manager, and I have to tell you from experience, and by the way, I was a public affairs manager for Shell Oil Company for many years, and my last 13 years before I retired, I was on the West Coast as the PA manager, and I had not one, not two, but 3 refineries. So I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, I had to do no research on this book, none whatsoever. So let's set up the stage here as he's met the refinery manager for the first time. He's had a good interview with him, and it goes like this. Pete, who is the refinery manager, is getting ready to interview him. Well, nice to meet you, Lance, and welcome to Bellflower. Please sit down. His deep, resonant voice filled the room nicely. He was obviously in control in his kingdom. I've never seen your resume, and I've been looking forward to meeting you. Pleased to be here, Mr. Peterson. And whoa, wait a minute, Lance. Mr. Peterson left us a long time ago. My name is Pete, okay? Now tell me what interests you about this job. Well, yes, sir, Pete, I understand. Predicting what the man would ask next, Lance preempted the question and repeated his well-rehearsed response, stating almost word for word what he had recited to the HR manager, Sonia. And before Pete could ask the next question, Lance made the positive point that while he had a minimum of actual public relations experience, his background as a newspaper editor and athlete made him qualified for the position. Further, he was an accomplished writer, a talent that he knew would be necessary in the position. Pete did not appear comfortable with Lance's rapid-fire response to a question that he wanted to ask. However, those were exactly the answers that he wanted to hear. That impressed him. He already liked the young man's style, but his youth and lack of experience about refinery operations concerned him. However, he was confident that Lance's limited knowledge would be greatly expanded over time. He was certainly teachable. Before Lance spoke again, the HR manager filled the void and said, Lance, you haven't asked about this position that you're looking to fill, but we believe it'll be very attractive to you. The starting salary is $55,000. Complete health care, expense account, and 2 weeks vacation, and after 1 year, 3 weeks after 3 years. A company car, fully maintained, and a full-time secretary. All in all, we think it's a pretty liberal package. Lance smiled before answering and thought, good gracious almighty, here I am making peanuts over in Lodi, living hand-to-mouth, driving an old weather-beaten car, no expense account, no health care. I must be dreaming. He finally answered with a beaming smile and said, well, yes, Sonia, that is a very liberal package. I guess my next question is, when do I start? Both Pete and Sonia laughed energetically at that question. She answered, well, you see, we had 3 more applicants for the position. Of course, we will be checking your references. We should be able to make a decision in a few days. Stand by. We'll let you know, and thank you for being here, Lance. It's been a pleasure to meet you. And by the way, those other process managers who met with you were very pleased. They liked you very much. Well, Lance wanted to get Pete's view on public relations, but he figured that would come later. He was more than pleased with the interview and proudly announced, well, thank you, both of you. I thoroughly enjoyed being here. I look forward to hearing favorably from you. If I'm given the chance, I believe I'll really like working here." As Lance prepared to leave, Pete accompanied them to the door and into the parking lot in Sonia's car. While waiting to join Sonia in her car, Lance stopped, turned to the refinery manager, and naively said, Pete, I guess it's the petroleum odor I smell coming from the refinery, is it?" "Yes, Lance," he answered with a broad smile on his tan face. "It is, and that's the smell of money." The smell of money. So now that you know it's not financial, then you might get interested in it. Lance is a 23-year-old virgin. And he meets this gal, and the girlfriend talks to her friend and says, "I've got to take Lance home and housebreaking." Lance becomes a very apt pupil. But in the meantime, he is in constant conflict with the refinery manager. The refinery manager, as so many refinery managers, they are focused always on the bottom line. What can they bring to the company? How can the company's stock rise? Well, unfortunately, that's not Lance's position there. His position is to create an effective public relation and community outreach plan, and he tries to do that. And he is in constant conflict with a refinery manager who doesn't want to have any kind of tours. He doesn't want to be involved with the media. He doesn't want to talk to the media. He hates the media and what have you. So many things happen in his experience, and all kinds of conflicts, fires, and so forth. Unfortunately, the community, the city council becomes very agitated, and they are now thinking very seriously of closing down the refinery because it is a nuisance, it is a public nuisance, and so he has to deal with that. As the story goes on, though, he is in conflict because he's a born-again journalist. That's what he wants to do, but he really likes being in public relations. So at the end, we don't know which path he takes, but you have to read the book to find out. The book is a very attractive price for this crowd here only at $10. I'll be glad to sign it. The good news is that all of the royalties of this book go to my mother's endowed scholarship at Southeast Missouri State University. And those royalties are matched 1-for-1 by Shell Company's foundation. So at this point, we have a scholarship there that has been one of the delights of my life, particularly when I hear from the recipients who say, you know, Mr. Munger, without that scholarship, I could never have graduated. And that more than makes my writing a very experience. So if any of you have any questions about the smell of money, I've got a few books over there for sale. I'll even sign them, and it'd be a pleasure for you to have it. It was a joy for me to write it. It was a joy also for me to be here with you folks. James has been just delightful to work with, and Jesse, you have been a more than adequate replacement for him. Thank you very much. I love your story. I can't believe that you were drinking in the shadow of Jim Harrison's death. I mean, and why not? Why not? But any questions, I would be glad to talk to you about it, how I got started. My first effort for keep in mind, I could write press releases in my sleep, but I've never done any really fictional writing. My first book, however, was a book entitled Mama, Don't You Want Me to Learn Nothing? It was a book about my life growing up in Southeast Missouri in the 40s and the 50s. And at that point, I caught fire, and since then I've written 4 more, and now I'm on my next one, which I know a little bit about. It's about racism in Southeast Missouri. Now, racism is not exclusive to Southeast Missouri, but this is a story really, in many ways, it's of my life in southeast Missouri and the racism and how it affected me at that time in life. So that's my story. Thanks for being here. Any questions? You got any? Nobody? Okay. Jesse, thank you.